Picture this. It is Sunday morning, April 10th, 1977, in the small town of Pine Ridge, Arkansas, deep in the Ozark foothills. The Mount Olive Missionary Baptist Church is packed shoulder to shoulder, black families in their best Sunday clothes, paper fans moving slowly against the humid air, children in starched shirts squirming on wooden pews. At the pulpit stands Reverend Elijah Freeman, 48 years old, broad-shouldered, voice like rolling thunder wrapped in velvet. He is preaching from Amos 5 verse 24. But let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. His words rise and fall, calling out sin in high places, calling for courage in low ones, calling especially for integrity among those who handle the Lord's money. Halfway through the sermon he pauses, wipes his brow with a white handkerchief, looks straight into the congregation and says, "There comes a moment when silence becomes complicity. When you see wrong being done in the house of God, and you stay quiet, you become part of the wrong." The church says, "Amen," so loud the windows rattle. No one knows, least of all his 17-year-old son Marcus sitting in the third row, that those will be the last public words Elijah Freeman ever speaks. That Friday night, he vanishes. No note, no suitcase missing, no car gone from the driveway. Only his pastoral robe, his well-worn Bible, the one with his name inscribed in careful fountain pen strokes on the flyleaf, and his sermon notebook for 1977 disappear with him. The sheriff's department searches for 3 weeks, finds nothing. The congregation holds a memorial service anyway. They sing Amazing Grace so many times the hymn feels like a plea instead of praise. Marcus, suddenly fatherless and already motherless, Sarah Freeman had died of cancer the previous summer, is taken in by an aunt and uncle who treat him more like an unpaid farmhand than grieving kin. He stops going to church the following Sunday. The wound festers into anger, then into a cold, permanent distance from anything that smells like religion. For 25 years, he carries the question like a stone in his chest. Did my father run away? Did he take his own life? Or did someone make sure he would never preach another sermon? Then, on the morning of April 9th, 2002, exactly 25 years and 1 day after that final Amos sermon, a logger named Tom Jenkins is clearing a section of National Forest 37 miles from Pine Ridge. He is cutting around an old hardwood stump, long rotted at the base, when his chainsaw nicks something that is not wood. He kills the engine, kneels, scrapes away decades of leaf mold, and finds a mildewed Adidas gym bag half buried beneath the stump's hollowed-out root ball. Inside, a badly deteriorated pastoral robe still bearing faint traces of communion wine stains on the cuffs, and a Bible whose front flyleaf, though swollen and foxed, still shows in faded ink. Elijah Freeman, Called to Serve, 1968. Tom does not open the bag further. He drives straight to the county sheriff's office. Within hours, the Arkansas State Police Major Crimes Unit is on scene with ground-penetrating radar, cadaver dogs, and forensic anthropologists. They do not find a body under that stump, only the bag, but the discovery reopens a file marked cold case, missing person April 13th, 1977. Detective Sarah Miller, lead investigator, calls Marcus Freeman at 7:14 a.m. He is 42 now, living alone in a one-bedroom apartment 20 miles from the Ozarks, working night shift security at a distribution warehouse. When the phone rings, he is eating cold cereal and staring at a television sermon he cannot bear to watch yet cannot turn off. "Mr. Freeman, this is Detective Miller. We believe we have located personal effects belonging to your father." Marcus does not speak for almost 30 seconds. When he finally answers, his voice is flat, practiced, the tone of a man who has learned not to hope. "What did you find?" she tells him. He hangs up, walks to the bathroom, vomits the cereal he just ate, then washes his face and waits for the patrol car she promised would pick him up. The drive to the site takes 47 minutes. Marcus spends most of it staring out the window, remembering his father's voice, the way it could make even the most hardened logger in the back pew sit up straighter. When they arrive, he sees the yellow crime scene tape, the forensic tent, the stump that has been half excavated like an archaeological dig. Detective Miller meets him at the tape line. She is 53, calm gray eyes, no makeup, the kind of person who has seen too much to be rattled by anything short of mass graves. "We need you to look at the items and confirm whether they belong to your father," she says. Inside the tent, on a folding table under portable lights, lie the robe and Bible. The robe is almost black with mold, seams splitting, but the clerical collar is still attached. The Bible's pages are fused in places, but the flyleaf inscription is legible. Marcus reaches out, stops himself, looks at Miller. "May I?" She nods. He touches the page with one finger, traces the letters of his father's name. "That's his handwriting," he says. His voice cracks on the last word. He always made the E with that little loop at the top. Then he sees something else, tucked inside the back cover, a single folded sheet of lined paper, edges crumbled, ink badly faded but still readable in places. It is not a sermon note. It is a private prayer dated April 11th, 1977, 2 days before the disappearance. "Lord, the burden is heavy. The money missing is now more than $10,000. Harold and George deny it, but the books do not lie. Give me wisdom to confront without destroying the flock. If I must speak publicly, let it be with love and not anger. Protect me, Father, for I fear they will do anything to keep this hidden." Marcus reads the words twice, 3 times. When he looks up, his eyes are wet, but his jaw is set. "My father did not run away," he tells Detective Miller. "And he did not kill himself. Someone made sure he never came back." Advanced English moment. The word "foxed" describes the brownish spots that appear on old paper due to age and moisture. Here it shows how long the Bible has been hidden. Idiom. The wound festers means unresolved pain or anger grows worse over time instead of healing. Historical context. In 1977 rural Arkansas, racial tensions in small towns were still raw. The Civil Rights Act was only 13 years old, and black pastors who spoke boldly about justice, especially financial justice inside white-influenced institutions, could face real danger. Philosophical teaching. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, German pastor executed by the Nazis, wrote that silence in the face of evil is itself evil. Elijah Freeman refused to be silent. His son spent 25 years silent in a different way, silent toward God, silent toward hope. Modern relevance. Today we speak of generational trauma and inherited silence, the way one generation's unresolved pain shapes the next. English learners note, cold case equals an unsolved investigation that has gone inactive. Reopen a file equals resume work on something previously abandoned. Thought-provoking close. If the truth about someone you loved had been buried for a quarter century, would you have the courage to dig, even when the first shovel of dirt might prove the worst thing you ever feared? Or would you leave the ground undisturbed so you could keep the version of the story that hurts less? Sometimes the most loving thing we can do for the dead is to let their truth breathe again, no matter how much it costs the living. Marcus leaves the crime scene with 2 photocopies, one of the prayer note, one of the Bible flyleaf. Detective Miller keeps the originals for forensic processing, latent fingerprints, possible trace DNA on the robe's collar, ink dating if the lab can manage it. She promises to call the moment anything moves. Marcus drives home in silence, windows down, April wind carrying the smell of dogwood and pine. He does not turn on the radio. When he reaches his apartment, he goes straight to the spare room he has kept as a shrine to his father's memory. Bookshelves lined with sermon binders, a worn leather chair, the small oak desk where Elijah used to write late into the night. Marcus pulls the 1976 sermon notebook from the shelf, the last complete volume he owns. He sits in the chair, opens to Easter Sunday 1976. The handwriting is strong, optimistic. He is risen. And because he lives, we too shall live. Marcus turns page after page, looking for the shift he now knows must have happened in early 1977. Nothing in 1976 hints at trouble. No underlined warnings about money, no question marks beside names. He closes the book, stands, paces. Then he remembers the church. If the 1977 volume is missing from home, perhaps his father kept it at Mount Olive, maybe locked in the office desk, maybe stored in the church library with other pastoral records. He grabs his keys. 25 years since he last crossed that threshold. The drive feels shorter than it should. When he parks in the gravel lot, the building looks smaller, paint peeling on the clapboard siding, but the steeple still points stubbornly toward heaven. Inside, the smell hits him first. Old hymnals, lemon furniture polish, the faint sweetness of altar flowers left too long. Pastor Harold Whitmore is wiping down pews. He is 78 now, back bent, but the eyes are still sharp. "Can I help you, son?" Marcus removes his cap. "Pastor Harold, it's Marcus Freeman." The old man freezes, dust rag dangling from his hand. Recognition dawns slowly, then joy, then something guarded. "Marcus, Lord have mercy. We thought we'd never see you in this sanctuary again." They talk for almost an hour. Harold explains that he and Reverend George Langston, now 75 and still assisting, have kept the church alive. Membership is down. Young people moving to Little Rock or Fayetteville, but they still hold service every Sunday. Marcus asks about the 1977 sermon notebook and diary. Harold frowns. "We never saw them after he disappeared. If they were here, the police would have taken them in 77. They search anyway. Office files, library shelves, even the old sacristy where communion elements are stored. Nothing." Marcus thanks him and turns to leave. As he reaches the door, Harold calls after him. "Your daddy was a good man, Marcus. Whatever happened, it wasn't his fault." The words feel like both comfort and evasion. Marcus drives away thinking about the prayer note. Harold and George deny it, but the books do not lie. Back home, he opens his father's 1976 notebook again, searching for any early hint. On the very last page, dated December 31st, 1976, he finds a single line in pencil, almost casual. "Must speak with H and G. Ree. Stewardship concerns before annual meeting." The initials match the erased names in the prayer note. Marcus's pulse quickens. He remembers the church's annual financial report was always presented the first Sunday in January. If his father planned to raise the issue publicly, that would have been the moment. Instead, he vanished 3 months later. The next morning, Marcus returns to Mount Olive unannounced. Harold is not there. Reverend George is alone in the office counting Sunday school, offering envelopes. Marcus asks to see the 1976 annual financial report. George hesitates, then shrugs. Old records are in the basement storage. They descend narrow stairs into a damp room lined with cardboard boxes. George pulls a banker's box labeled 1976 to 1980 financials. Inside are mimeographed reports, yellowed ledgers. Marcus flips to January 1977. The numbers look clean, until he notices the miscellaneous missions line item, $12,400 withdrawn December 28, 1976, marked cash for Regional Youth Conference. No receipt attached. No signature from the treasurer. Marcus remembers no youth conference happened that winter. He looks up at George. "Did my father ever mention concerns about this withdrawal?" George's jaw tightens. "He never said anything to me." Marcus replaces the report, thanks him, leaves. That evening he calls Detective Miller, tells her about the ledger anomaly and the initials in the 1976 notebook. She listens carefully. "We'll subpoena the church's full financial history. If there was embezzlement, there will be a paper trail." 2 days later, Miller calls back. "We found something else." The logger who discovered the bag, Tom Jenkins, says he was paid cash in 1998 to dig under that stump and bury a gym bag. The man who hired him wore a hat low and paid extra not to ask questions. Tom never looked inside. He thought it was moonshine or stolen goods. We showed him photos of Harold and George from 1977 and again recent. He picked George out of a six-pack lineup. Marcus feels the ground shift beneath him. They buried the evidence 21 years after the murder? "Looks that way," Miller says. Perhaps they got nervous when a new cold case unit started re-examining old files in 1997. Or maybe someone was asking too many questions. That night, Marcus dreams of his father standing at the pulpit, pointing straight at him, saying only one sentence: "Let justice roll." He wakes at 3:17 a.m., sweating, heart hammering. He knows what he has to do next. Advanced English moment. Mimeographed refers to an old duplicating process using stencils and ink, common in churches and schools before photocopiers became widespread. Idiom. Paper trail equals documented evidence that can be followed backward to reveal wrongdoing. Historical context. In the 1970s American South, many small black churches handled cash offerings with minimal oversight. Embezzlement by trusted deacons or pastors was not uncommon and rarely prosecuted due to community reluctance to air family business publicly. Philosophical teaching. Soren Kierkegaard wrote that the tyrant dies and his rule is over. The martyr dies and his rule begins. Elijah Freeman's death did not end his influence. It planted a seed that germinated 25 years later in his son's search for truth. Modern relevance. Today we speak of financial transparency in nonprofits and churches. Many denominations now require audited books and mandatory reporting of large cash transactions. English learners note. Banker's box equals large cardboard archive box with lid. Six-pack lineup equals photo array of 6 faces used in eyewitness identification. Thought-provoking close. If you discovered that the people you trusted most, perhaps even family or church leaders, had hidden a terrible secret for decades, would you expose it and risk shattering the community that raised you? Or would you stay silent to preserve the only peace you have ever known? Truth is rarely free. The question is whether you value it enough to pay the price. Marcus cannot shake the image of Reverend George's face when he asked about the $12,400 withdrawal. Fear masked as indifference, eyes darting to the basement stairs as though the old ledgers themselves might rise up and accuse him. He decides to act before the police move. He returns to Mount Olive on Wednesday evening, arriving just as Bible study lets out. Pastor Harold is locking the front door when Marcus calls his name. Harold turns, smiles tightly. "Back so soon? I need to speak with you and Reverend George together," Marcus says. Privately. Harold hesitates, then nods. They walk to the pastor's study. George is already there, sorting hymnals. When Marcus enters, both men stiffen. Marcus does not sit. He places the photocopy of the prayer note on the desk. "My father wrote this 2 days before he disappeared. He names both of you. He says the books do not lie." Silence stretches so long Marcus can hear the wall clock ticking. Harold speaks first, voice thin. "Elijah was troubled those last months. Grief over Sarah. Pressure of the ministry. He may have imagined things." Marcus lays the January 1977 financial report beside the prayer note. "This withdrawal, $12, for 100 cash, no receipt, no conference ever held. My father was about to expose it." George's hands tremble on the hymnal. "You don't understand how hard it was to keep this church running. We borrowed from the building fund to pay the electric bill, the insurance. We always intended to repay." "With interest?" Marcus asks. "Or did the interest become a new car for one of you?" Harold stands. "That's enough. You're accusing us of stealing from the Lord's house based on 25-year-old paper." Marcus looks at George. "The logger who buried the bag in 1998 picked your photo out of a lineup. You paid him cash, church cash, to hide my father's robe and Bible under that stump." George's knees buckle. He sits hard in the chair. Tears spill. "We didn't mean for it to happen," he whispers. "That Friday night, Elijah called us to the basement after prayer meeting. Said he had proof. Said unless we confessed Sunday morning, he would read the ledger discrepancies from the pulpit." Harold panicked. Pushed him. Elijah fell, hit his head on the concrete step. "There was so much blood," Harold cuts in, voice shaking. "We thought he was dead. We wrapped him in his own robe, carried him to the cemetery, buried him under the old dog grave. No one ever dug there. We thought it was over." Marcus feels sick. "And the bag?" George wipes his face. "In 1998, the state started digitizing old missing persons files. We got scared someone would reopen the case. We dug up the robe and Bible, put them in that Adidas bag Tom Jenkins used for hunting gear. He never asked questions, and paid him to bury it far away under that stump. We thought if the items were found, people would believe Elijah just walked off and discarded his identity. Marcus's voice is very quiet. You murder my father because he wouldn't let you steal from the church. Neither man answers. Marcus turns to leave. At the door he pauses. I'm going to Detective Miller tonight. You have until tomorrow morning to turn yourselves in. If you don't, I'll make sure every newspaper in Arkansas knows exactly what happened in that basement. He walks out. Behind him, he hears Harold sobbing, George whispering, it's over. That night Marcus drives to the sheriff's office. Miller listens to the taped confession he secretly recorded on his phone, legal in Arkansas with one-party consent. By 2 a.m., state police SWAT teams are rolling toward the pastor's homes. Harold surrenders at 4:17 a.m. George tries to run, gets as far as his backyard before troopers tackle him. Both men are booked on first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, tampering with evidence, embezzlement, and abuse of a corpse. Bail is denied. The next morning the story breaks on every Arkansas news station. 1977 cold case murder solved. Church leaders confess to killing pastor over embezzlement. Marcus gives one interview. He speaks calmly. My father died trying to protect the integrity of his church. That's the legacy I want people to remember. Advanced English moment. One-party consent refers to recording laws that allow a conversation to be taped legally if only one participant knows. Contrast with two-party consent states. Idiom. The legacy I want people to remember equals the lasting positive memory or inheritance someone leaves behind. Historical context. In the late 1970s, many small Southern churches still operated on cash with little formal accounting. Embezzlement scandals sometimes tore congregations apart for generations. Philosophical teaching. Immanuel Kant's categorical imperative. Act only according to that maxim whereby you can at the same time will that it should become a universal law. Elijah Freeman lived by that principle. Harold and George lived by expediency. Modern relevance. Today, church financial scandals still make headlines. Think megachurch pastors using tithes for private jets. Transparency laws and independent audits now exist in many denominations precisely because of cases like this. English learners note. Fester, earlier chapter, heel versus fester, lineup equals police identification procedure. Thought-provoking close. If protecting an institution meant betraying the very values it was built upon, would you speak the truth and risk its destruction, or stay silent and let the rot spread? Integrity is not comfortable. It is costly. But comfort without integrity is just another word for cowardice. The arraignment is swift. Both men plead not guilty at first, then, facing overwhelming evidence, George's recorded confession, the prayer note, the logger's identification, partial skeletal remains recovered from the dog grave showing blunt force trauma to the occipital bone, changed to guilty pleas on all counts in exchange for avoiding the death penalty. Sentencing. Life without parole for George, 40 years for Harold, accounting for his age and lesser physical role in the strangulation. The Congregation of Mount Olive fractures. Some members leave forever, others stay, determined to rebuild on truth instead of secrets. An interim pastor is appointed. Marcus attends the first Sunday after the pleas. He sits in his father's old pew. When the new pastor calls for testimonies, Marcus stands. My father loved this church, he says. He died because he loved it too much to let it be corrupted. I spent 25 years angry at God, angry at the church, angry at myself. Today I'm asking forgiveness for my silence, for my absence. And I'm asking you to help me honor him the right way. The vote is unanimous. Mount Olive will fund a proper reburial and memorial service for Reverend Elijah Freeman. DNA confirms the remains are his. The funeral is held 6 weeks later on a clear May morning. Over 400 people attend. Former members who had drifted away, people from neighboring towns who remembered Elijah's preaching, even a few white pastors who had quietly admired him during the tense years of integration. Marcus delivers the eulogy. He reads from the Amos sermon transcript the police recovered from the 1977 notebook. Justice must roll down like waters. Then he adds his own words. My father believed the church should be the safest place on earth for truth. He gave his life proving it. Let us make sure his sacrifice was not in vain. After the service, the casket is lowered into a new plot near his wife, Sarah. Marcus places a single white rose on the lid. That evening, he returns to the hospital. Robbie Hark, now fully recovered from his fever, is waiting with his aunt and uncle. The boy runs to Marcus and hugs him. You kept your promise, Robbie says. Marcus kneels. And you kept me company when I needed it most. He has already spoken with Child Protective Services. The aunt and uncle are not abusive, just overwhelmed and poorly equipped. Marcus has offered to mentor Robbie, take him to church, help with homework, be the steady adult presence the boy lost when his mother died. The aunt weeps with gratitude. Months pass. Marcus begins attending Mount Olive regularly. He joins the finance committee, ironically the same committee his father once served on. He insists on monthly independent audits, online giving transparency, published budgets. The congregation slowly rebuilds trust. Attendance climbs. Young families return. One Sunday, the new pastor asks Marcus to preach. He chooses Matthew 18 verses 15 to 17, the same passage his father had outlined in that final sermon notebook. When your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. If he listens, you have gained your brother. Marcus speaks for 32 minutes. He does not mention Harold or George by name. He does not need to. Everyone knows. When he finishes, the congregation stands. Not out of obligation. Out of recognition. Advanced English moment. Occipital bone equals the bone at the back and base of the skull. Blunt force trauma there often indicates a fatal fall or blow. Idiom. In vain equals without purpose or result. Elijah's death was not in vain because it eventually brought truth and reform. Historical context. Post-1970s, many black churches in the rural South began adopting more formal financial accountability precisely because of earlier scandals that eroded trust. Philosophical teaching. Hannah Arendt's Banality of Evil. Harold and George were not monsters. They were ordinary men who rationalized theft, then murder, then cover up, step by step, until evil became routine. Modern relevance. Whistleblower protections, anonymous tip lines, and mandatory background checks now exist in many denominations to prevent exactly this kind of long-term concealment. English learners note. Eulogy equals speech honoring the deceased. Arraignment equals court hearing where charges are formally read and pleas entered. Thought-provoking close. If forgiveness is a gift you give yourself as much as the other person, who in your life still holds a piece of your peace because you have not yet released them. Forgiveness does not erase justice. It frees the forgiver to live again. Choose freedom. 10 years later, May 2012, Marcus Freeman stands at the same pulpit his father once commanded. He is 52 now, hair gray at the temples, voice deeper with age, but still carrying that same resonant timbre that once made Pine Ridge sit up and listen. Mount Olive Missionary Baptist Church is full again, standing room only. Today is the dedication of the Elijah Freeman Community Center built behind the sanctuary, a food pantry, after-school tutoring rooms, financial literacy classes, a small library stocked with theology books and civil rights history. The center is funded partly by restitution payments court-ordered from Harold and George's remaining assets, partly by congregation savings, partly by grants Marcus spent 3 years applying for. Robbie Hark, now 20, is the center's first full-time youth coordinator. He is studying social work at the University of Arkansas, preaches on Youth Sunday, and still carries the take-home communion kit Marcus gave him that night in the hospital. When the dedication ribbon is cut, Robbie steps to the microphone first. When I was 10 years old, I sat crying against a tree in the cemetery because I felt alone, he begins. A stranger stopped, listened, took me to the hospital, kept his promise to bring me communion. That stranger was Marcus Freeman. He showed me what a father looks like, not perfect, but present. Because he was present for me, I'm here today trying to be present for every kid who walks through these doors feeling like I did. The congregation applauds. Marcus follows. He does not preach long. My father used to say justice rolls like water, steady, persistent, unstoppable. For 25 years I thought that water had dried up. Then God used a logger, a forgotten bag, a sick boy, and 2 guilty men to prove me wrong. Justice did roll. Truth did come out. And love, real, costly, patient love, won in the end. He pauses, looks at Robbie. This center is named for my father, but it belongs to all of us. Let it be a place where no child ever feels they have to cry alone in a cemetery again. After the service, Marcus and Robbie walk to the cemetery together. They stop first at Sarah's grave, then at Elijah's. Marcus places fresh flowers. Robbie lays a single sheet of paper, a letter he wrote to Elijah he never sent. Thank you for raising a son who raised me, it reads. They stand in silence a long time. Finally, Robbie speaks. Do you still miss him? Every day, Marcus answers. But the missing is different now. It's softer. It has room for gratitude beside the grief. They walk back to the church arm in arm. Behind them, the Ozark wind moves through the pines, carrying the sound of children already playing in the new center's courtyard. Advanced English moment. Restitution equals court-ordered payment to compensate victims for loss or damage. Here it means financial repayment from the embezzled funds. Idiom. Standing room only equals so crowded that people must stand because all seats are taken. Historical context. Community centers attached to black churches became common in the 1980s, 2000s as places of refuge, education, and economic empowerment in underserved rural areas. Philosophical teaching. Viktor Frankl, man's search for meaning, suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds a meaning. Marcus's 25 years of pain found meaning in the center, in Robbie, in the restoration of his father's legacy. Modern relevance. Today, many churches run food pantries, tutoring programs, and trauma-informed youth ministries, direct responses to the kind of generational wounds this story uncovers. English learners note, softer, here describes emotional pain that has lost its sharpest edge through time and purpose. Final thought-provoking message. If one act of kindness to a crying boy in a cemetery can ripple forward 10 years and help heal an entire community, what single act of courage or compassion could you do today that might still be changing lives 25 years from now? Never underestimate the distance one small decision can travel when it is carried on the current of love instead of the stagnation of silence. Go be the current. The water is waiting to roll.